new that have never been done before.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We the people are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
Oh, why am I down there? That seems to be an interesting little position. Now, there you go. I'll put me there. How are you, folks? Life, the universe, and everything going all right for you? Don't know if you can hear it, but it is peace instantly precipitating here at the moment. I do have a window open, and I was going to have a camera out, but it's as black as the inside of a black dog. So you're not going to see too much at the moment. I could put on the blinding lights out the front, but that may scare away the neighbours and a bit of the fauna that might be ducking for cover at the moment. We'll get to talk about the cyclone shortly, but yeah, we've had another day preparing for that. The drains we dug yesterday are getting a good workout and thankfully seem to be doing their job at the moment, even though we are not getting what's I would call very heavy rain. Where we are, we're getting spits and spats of it. When it does come through, it's mildly heavy, but I would say all up today, maybe 20 mil if we're lucky. And lucky, that seems like a thing, but yeah, maybe 20 mil, maybe an inch, 25 mil. There could be a bit more coming overnight, we suspect. And of course, the cyclone, not sure if it's spelled with a CY or a PSY at the moment, is doing rather weird things. I guess, first of all, what I'd like to do is share with you what the system is currently doing. So that's the broad view of it here at the moment, sitting off the Queensland coast, and I'll zoom in a little bit for you, and we'll try and get some bearings. So the two little islands that you can see off the coast here, just north of the marker, I'll put a marker in between the two. That's North and South Stradbroke Islands and Moreton Island up there too. Now, currently, the wind is around 24 knots blowing over that island. If you go back down here around the coast, the Gold Coast, it's around 25. Go out a little further, it's picking up 38 knots, a little deeper, 33. It'll slow down as you get closer to the eye, 31, 25. And sitting there in the eye at the moment, it's just as you would expect to be 1 knot. Out here, in the back of the hinterland, around about the parts where we are, not blowing too hard at the moment, only 14 knots. And that seems to be pretty consistent pretty much all the way up the coast. We would expect that. Where the wind is probably going to do some of its worst damage will be down in the northern New South Wales or the Northern Rivers area. And right now, their coastline is being pounded. 35 knots there. And look, the winds are not terribly heavy. What is being done here is a phenomenal amount of weight in the water. So there is a huge amount of power in that water, and it is being extremely destructive. Now, you might remember there was a hurricane not all that long ago that came through the Gulf of what is now America, but used to be the Gulf of Mexico, and was tearing across under Texas, and it brushed sort of Texas and then hit Florida dead on, hit the Panhandle dead on, actually hit the U.S. Naval Control Base head on, and they were predicting a Category 5 coming across the Panhandle, the Florida Panhandle at that time. And there was an Australian company that got involved and tried to do some weather modification of their own, and by all accounts were quite successful at instantly lowering the threats that the hurricane was delivering. Well, that company is called Atmospherica, and you can go and check out their website at atmospherica.org. I'm pretty sure it is Atmospherica, ATMOSPHERICA.org, and you can see what David Miles is getting up to. Now, as you can see, drought mitigation, They do work with fires, mitigating fires. They also do a great deal of work in research and development with how to modify weather systems, rain acquisition being one of them. And I know that David was put to the test down in the Wimmera in Victoria a little while ago, and I believe was a reasonably successful test. Now, what do they do with this storm shielding and fire shielding and associated other bits and pieces? Well, I gather that most of what they do is proprietary information. So they're not, exactly handing out all the details to the likes of me. However, that webpage is full of a huge amount of information on what Atmospherica claim they can do and what they're developing to be able to do in the future. It's very exciting stuff. And as I say, the impact that they had on the Florida hurricane was substantial. I want to say it dropped from a 4 or 5 down to a 1 or 2 after their intervention, and they only came in at the very last moment. Well, it seems like something like that might be happening again. There has been a David Miles, I don't know what do you call them these days, not a tweet. But anyway, as a result of private backers stepping forward to fund this unique project for coastal southern or southeastern Queensland and northern New South Wales, Atmospherica has, at 12 a.m. on the 4th of the 3rd, 2025, commenced a tropical cyclone Alfred intervention for southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. This is to mitigate the following major threats as defined by the Bureau of Meteorology. He's working with the Bureau of Meteorology in this endeavour. Damaging to destructive winds, heavy to intense rainfall and flooding, and storm surge and coastal inundation. So this is what Atmospherica are working to mitigate. A deeper objective of this project is to demonstrate the capability to edit weather outcomes ahead of event impact on farms, communities, and cities in harm's way. Results from this undertaking will be determined as a success or a fail solely based on the data collected and published by the Bureau of Meteorology at the end of the week. Well, I don't know about you. I've disappeared. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make me feel exactly wonderful. I'll be back in a minute. I have to exit and come back. Right, I'm back. I don't know how much of that you heard. Did you hear all that? Maybe you were able to read it yourself, if that's the way it is. But Atmospherica, at any rate, are doing some pretty great things. They've been asked to become involved in an intervention for Cyclone Alfred, and that happened on the 4th of March. That's what that thing was, if you didn't hear me speak it. I'm not looking at the chat. I probably should look at the chat and see what you're saying to me. Hello to everybody in the chat. We'll get the cyclone crap out of the way, and that's about the most of it. G'day, Alan, first in the house tonight. I thought Baz was first in the house tonight, so I don't know what's going on. Oh, it's dropped. It's dropped a lot of your comments because I had to go out and come back, so I'm sorry. Hello to everybody who was first in the show. I did see Baz's name first up there tonight, and I know Sandy's floating around. Sunflower, of course. Aussie Sue is floating around. And I think I saw Michelle's name. Hello, Belinda. G'day, Pete. Sorry about our short conversations today. In fact, sorry to everybody who's been ringing me today and yesterday. It's been very difficult to sit down and hear what you've had to say and deal too much with it because we have been under the gun around here just a little bit, as you might imagine. So thank you for indulging me and letting me beg off the phone rather quickly, even if I did so rather quickly or abruptly at times. It's just that we're really under the gun to get things done around here. And I get a very, 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 very large amount of phone calls on a daily basis. And that's all great. I don't mind getting the phone calls. If I can help, that's what I'm here for. And usually it's not an issue. But at this point in time, at the moment, it's just a little busy while we try and get things done. You're not seeing footage, says Paul. Okay, I haven't played a video yet, I don't think. And you weren't seeing anything from the web pages I was showing. This is all very strange. Okay. No pictures. All right. All right. Let me put a picture up now. And this is probably a bit deeper in the chat. Let me put a picture up here and see whether or not you can see anything from it. It's a nice picture. It's about the West Australian Premier, Roger Cook, who's decided to call J.D. Vance a knob. Did you see that picture? I'll come back to your chat. J.D. Vance being called a knob by the West Australian Premier, Roger Cook, who I'm not completely sure himself isn't exactly a knob. At any rate, West Australia being what it is, I think only second to Victoria behind their communistic want and desire to maintain their control over the people. I think somebody might have had a word in his ear, because a little while after he'd made that comment where he called Vice President J.D. Vance a knob, he decided he probably, if he was a smart man, should do a little backpedaling. And fingers crossed you get to see this.
It was a light moment in the event earlier today, perhaps an unprofessional moment. I didn't mean any offence by it. I don't think the people in the Oval Office are listening to a sub-jurisdictional CEO in Western Australia, but I'll leave most of that commentary up to the feds.
A sub-jurisdictional CEO in Western Australia is how the Western Australian Premier described himself to mainstream media today. Does that ring any bells? Would you like to see it again? Because I had to watch it a couple of times to make sure it was exactly what he said. Do you understand what it means? Do you understand? I'm not trying to be rude. Do you really understand what he's saying? Because he's banking that people do not, or will pass it over, or just think, oh, that's a flowery way of saying Premier. But it's not. Have a listen. It was a light
moment in the event earlier today, perhaps an unprofessional moment. I didn't mean any offence by it. I don't think the people in the Oval Office are listening to a sub-jurisdictional CEO in Western Australia, but I'll leave most of that commentary up to the feds.
We don't refer to our government generally as the feds. Maybe they do in their circles, but it's certainly how they're referred to in America, the feds. A sub-jurisdictional CEO. Take that bit of video to your friends who think you're a lunatic and like wearing tinfoil hats, and ask them to explain what is a sub-jurisdictional CEO in Western Australia mean. Truly. Because he's telling you he's part of the American jurisdiction. There is no difference at the moment in my heart and in my mind between Australia, Canada, and Mexico, other than the tyranny of distance. Why is this the case? Well, in part because all of those companies have far left-leaning leaders who are committed to the cabal in all ways, shapes, and forms. And we'll get to it very shortly, but Albanese and co. have been responsible for a great many rather interesting links to Ukraine, as we all know, but there's also quite a few interesting links popping up to other countries, and one in particular that'll make your eyes pop. So that's coming up. I dislike this man intensely. A green fantasy, it's been called. Labor's hydrogen hopes go up in smoke. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of morons. Now, what is it about this? Well, Labor had planned to be able to take on the world with our ability to produce hydrogen, which, just between you and me, comes from water. And is pretty easy to attain in most parts of the world. But anyway, we were going to make this a major export industry by 2030. And of course, it was going to meet net zero goals because hydrogen is clean. You know, it doesn't get any cleaner. But, oops, some 99% of the announced capacity of the projects has not progressed beyond the concept or approval stage, with less than 30,000 tonnes a year reaching a final investment decision or even starting construction. Now, 30,000 tonnes. I had to ring the only bloke I know that knows a lot about hydrogen. I rang Tim Dwyer, as one would do. And I said, how do you turn 30,000 tonnes of gas into tonnes of gas? You do it by turning it to liquid. And there is a certain ratio that works down. But to give you an idea, out of 1 litre of water, you can produce 1,400 gas litres of hydrogen. 1 to 1,400 is the ratio. 1 litre creates 1,400 litres of hydrogen. And I can tell you, I run this bus on less than a litre of water, and I get 3,500 Ks out of it. It's a hell of a bloody thing. But these people who've been paid, I don't know how many millions, potentially billions, but probably millions, how much money they have ploughed into this and been given by the Australian taxpayer through the morons that are in charge of the bank at the moment. And nearly 100 of these projects that have been proposed for Australia are dead in the water. Absolutely dead in the water. Why is that? Well, nobody's really figured out what they're going to do with 30,000 tonnes, let alone 300,000 tonnes or 3 million tonnes of liquid hydrogen. What it does cause is a bit of an issue with storage. I suspect that could be another story altogether. It is, of course, an endlessly renewable resource, and it is green. It is something we should really be looking at. But only serious people with, a bit of a brain should be in charge of being able to look into these sorts of things, not these pigs of human beings that appear to represent us and do nothing of the sort. There might be some changing in the wind there, some changing in the guards, some amalgamations. I don't know. We'll talk about that in a little while as well. But first of all, if you're a V8 supercar fan, if you like enduro racing, in fact, if you like any form of motorsport, you will have heard of Mount Panorama. Probably not because Bathurst is such a famous city for its Charles Sturt University and a few other bits and pieces around town. No, it is famous for one thing, the other race that stops a nation. I'm talking about the Bathurst 1000 that started out as the Hardy-Ferodo 500 from memory, or the James Hardy 500 it might have been. It's been going for years and 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 years. But now there's trouble. Why? Because Uncle Jade Flynn from the Wiradjuri, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, traditional owners of Central West Aboriginal Corporation have, well, what can I say? They've been creative. They have placed a land claim on the top of Mount Panorama, like the peak of Mount Panorama. They want it declared a sacred site. Now, why would they like it declared a sacred site? Well, that's because in 2022, the traditional owners, the Wiradjuri traditional owners of Central West Aboriginal Corporation, that is the full name of this mob, they decided to scatter the ashes of a former member, Uncle Brian Grant, there in 2022. Now, I don't know if Uncle Brian was a motorsport fan. I don't know if Uncle Brian hated motorsport. But that's where they decided to spread his ashes. And here we are, 2025. His ashes have barely had time to be blown away in the wind from the exhaust and the draft blown off the V8 supercars going around the mountain. And here we are having a land claim, trying to make it a sacred site. I'm not exactly sure what's sacred about Uncle Brian Grant, and I mean no disrespect by that. He may be a very respected high lawman of the area. He may well be. However, Roy Arcey, who is actually a Wiradjuri elder, and he's formerly chair of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, has come out and said, "You mob are crazy, eh? Bloody crazy." Why would you think that would be? Well, that's because Bathurst has its own local Aboriginal council or land council, not involved with the Wiradjuri Central West Corporation conglomerate. I mean, I'm sure it's still involved with the corporation somewhere, but the Bathurst local Aboriginal Land Council are the group that have the rights to that. So I'm wondering why the Wiradjuri group went and buried one of theirs on top of a mountain that is not really within their territory. It's all getting a little bit murky. There must be money involved, do you think? Well, you bet your ass there is. And I'm sure we'll be able to tell you more about that in the coming days and weeks. But, yeah, there's money involved. There always is, isn't there? Speaking of money, here's an interesting bit of news out of the EU. The EU Court of Justice, pardon me, has decided that certain doctors will be liable for damage for what they've done. Those jabby doctors are responsible and liable for the consequences of the injections that they've handed out because they could have refused to intervene. Such a judgment is the judgment of the European Court of Justice. Hip, hip, hooray. Lots of these judgments coming down in various different countries. Happens to be a few of them coming out of places like the ICC and this EU Court of Justice. I once again applaud them for going through the motions, I guess, because that's really all it is, isn't it? Who is the enforcement arm for the EU Court of Justice? Who is going to go and collect the people responsible for doing the damage? And are they going to start at the top, or are they going to start at what I would probably call the bottom, which is the people at the end doing the jabbing? I mean, I think they're equally culpable. I don't know that it matters which end you start terribly, but I'd be starting at the top because they're the bastards who've got the most amount of money and ability to run. Because even though we all know the doctors are paid extremely well, they are not paid anywhere near as well as the politicians in most cases. And I'm not talking about the politicians' money that comes from the people. I'm talking about the way they are paid in other ways, other benefits. And I don't think that there is any doubt that those other benefits have been shining through. A lot of things happening in Europe at the moment. They had a meeting of morons there in the UK a couple of days ago. Zelensky turned up where he was made and put on show, stood out the front of a group for a group photo that looked like a bunch of moronic people working fervently to start World War III. Zelensky went to that meeting of European leaders in the UK directly after he'd left America and the bullshit that happened in the Oval Office with Trump and Vance. He went to them to ask the EU to go to war with Russia. Not with Russia, against Russia. And that's what that meeting was ostensibly about, trying to convince all the members of that little mad, moronic mob that they should be launching attacks against Mother Russia and supporting the Ukraine in every way. Well, that didn't work out so well either. And it worked out so badly that weapons that are already there, sitting in ports, waiting to be offloaded from ships, these particularly are Canadian and UK weapons that were on board a cargo ship, have been attacked. Now, that ship has been sunk in Kursk I think it is. That ship has been sunk by Russian bombers and American bombers. So it seems that the EU have been put on notice that America aren't going to come and play in your war, and Russia is certainly not going to let you amass a great deal of weapons on their border and start flinging them around with a madman like Zelensky, who is quite clearly, regardless of any weak admissions or apologies he made, well, it wasn't an apology, a regret that he put out. This is a man who wants war, and make no doubt about it, that mad mob of European leaders are exactly the same. They're all from the crazy left, and they are desperate to continue the war with Russia. However, they are a little pragmatic. They were able to tell Zelensky, hey, listen, we can't do that without America. All of Europe cannot fight Russia. Germany, France, Italy, nada. We don't got enough shit, mate. We can't play the big boys' games. But by God, they can talk the big boys' talk, can't they? When are the people of Europe going to wake up to what's going on? I'm not sure that Europe is awake to any level. Certainly there are some, like there are some in Australia. And that, I wasn't going to talk about this tonight, but it does lead me to a point that I encourage you to go to vofhq.com, click on the corruption whistleblower link there, and go and have a look at the evidence that we are providing through the corruption whistleblower. They're the ones who've actually put it all together. We've just put it on the website. The evidence for the grand jury indictments that happened in a couple of weeks ago down in Canberra. Or I beg your pardon, down in February in Canberra on the 8th. So nearly a month ago now. I would urge you to read through those documents, take note of the evidence, and please, if you would like to be part of the indictment process, and there is no risk to you with this, if you would like to be part of that indictment process, please add your name. I'm trying to equate it to signing a petition. It is pretty much the same kind of thing. What that will do is exclude you from being part of a jury in any trial that goes forward, but I wouldn't be too worried about that. What we do need is a certain level of returns of the paperwork there. So you fill it in, say, yes, I'm up for this indictment, this is my name, this is who I am. And you send that document back to the corruption whistleblower. The details are all there on the VOFHQ website. And your document will go in with quite a few others that will eventually be going to the ICC and may also, although no, I can't see why it would go to the EU Court of Justice, but the ICC is where it will head. And it will go there without the need for Mark Dreyfus to give it his blessing. Of course, he would never give it his blessing, and who knows, they may well choose to ignore it at the end of the day. But they haven't in the past. Bear in mind that John Howard has been indicted, and so has Anthony Albanese. Now, I don't think Albanese is travelling to The Hague anytime soon, and I wonder whether or not anybody would arrest him if he did, because it's still my understanding we do not have an enforcement arm to protect the people, let alone protect the law. A couple of days ago, a week ago, whenever it was, I did say I'd heard stories about, thousands of disgruntled police, ex-police who've left the force and are now banding together. I've heard stories, the same stories about military folks who have done exactly the same. They've been kicked out because they refused to be jabbed up or various other reasons, and they want to still be involved. They know the difference between good and evil. And there are any number of great police out there. There are just so many morons who are brain dead, brainwashed, and unable to think for themselves. And we've seen evidence of that in senior police in Victoria only a few days ago when the last post was played on a Sunday at the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, where an bloody armada of police turned up to what I think, was maybe half a dozen or 8 people who literally turned up to pay their respects, not to have a protest, not to wave placards, not to carry on, but turned up to pay their respects for the last post on a Sunday ever. Why is that? Well, if you're not unaware, the last post is played at 4:45 every afternoon in front of the shrine. And on a Sunday, the Victoria Police now have decided it's too expensive to protect it. Protect what? I'm not quite sure. The bugler? I'm also aware that the shrine is protected by a number of countries' military. Why the Victoria Police required? Has there ever been a riot or anything at that Sunday last post event? No, there hasn't. Now, this is just another way to make sure we do forget. But we won't. Never, ever, ever let these bastards forget what they've done. Always remember that you might have been allowed to go to the pub and have a beer, but only if you promised to sit down and drink it. You weren't allowed to dance. You weren't allowed to stand up or sing. Only those who complied were allowed to do that. You remember those times? Don't forget those times. That's what they're banking on, that your memory will soften. And God knows there's enough soft brains out there at the moment. We don't need to add to their ranks. Always remember what these bastards did to you. And Albo's still doing it. I mean, fair dinkum. We should be reaching for the Vaseline. So it turns out that while Albo's watching the budget blow out and blow out and blow out and blow out and blow out, Australia has been identified as the single biggest buyer of oil products made from Russian crude, raising some concerns that the Albanese government has funded both sides of the Russian-Ukrainian war. I mean, it is just so stupid it's true. You know it, don't you? It's just so stupid it's true. But then who's really making the money out of that? Because someone is. I mean, we can say, oh, how stupid is that? Ha ha ha. Follow the money, folks. Follow the money. Because that is where the truth is always found. You might remember the red-headed clown, Gillard, was really good at handing out our money, like every Labor Prime Minister that I think we've ever had. But she particularly had a goal in mind for herself with the money that she handed out internationally. Now, we've seen how USAID is working out. USAID is working out at the moment. It's, I think, already realized $105 billion worth of cost savings to date, just through the Doge investigation. $105 billion. Please, God, let this happen. Please, God, let this happen with us. Anyway, somebody at the Australian government decided, things are a bit on the nose with some of these checks we keep sending out. I reckon it could blow up in our face. I'm sorry, that's the red-headed clown's voice I was trying to do. And she's probably not talking about it. She's probably sunning herself on an Adelaide beach somewhere at the moment. Oh, no, I won't say that. That's a bit cruel. One of the things I absolutely hated about the red-headed clown was her penchant to want to give out as much money as she could to the Clintons. And she pledged a phenomenal amount, well over $100 million of our taxpayer money to the Clinton Foundation. Well, that was a bit over 10 years ago. And finally, just recently, somebody in the government said, I don't think we'll pay that one. So, okay, we're stopping the payments. What about the $88 million of Australian taxpayer money that we've already sent to the Clinton Foundation? Is anybody auditing that? I think Doge would like to. They'll certainly be able to see a bit of what's been spent. And if it's not a government, it's certainly not a government corporation. It's a privately owned charity, non-for-profit. It might be very difficult to get the eyes on. But when you have the operators that Elon Musk has pushing keyboards at Doge, I don't think there are any secrets. And as a former respected journalist in the country, and I say formerly respected because I've lost a lot of respect for him these days, but he does have one point when he says, in the digital world, every touch leaves its trace, and it will be found. I mentioned earlier that there is some interesting things happening regarding election time, which is coming up. Now, whether you choose to vote or whether you choose not to vote, that is entirely up to you. Obviously, who you choose to vote for is also entirely up to you. I'm not a particularly big fan of the old voting idea. I think I've talked about that enough on the program for those people who've been watching for a while to understand. But I do understand that many people have been programmed that they must try and do something. And I was one of those people. I initially, when I started this whole thing, my idea was, as I've said numerous times, to maybe come up with some way that we can Trojan horse the parliament, get good people in there and win our freedom. Not win our freedom, take our freedom back and kick open the doors that keep the secrets hidden. Air out the cupboards, let the sunlight in. Well, there's something coming called the Australia First Alliance. Take a deep breath. This is Craig Kelly, pardon me, and he'll be from the Libertarian side. That is Michael O'Neill, who will also be running for the iHeart side. And, of course, Gerard Rennick's little group, People First, are also coming together. What does this mean? Well, it means potentially that there is a chance in New South Wales, at any rate, because that's what they're looking to run, or where they're doing this amalgamated Senate run at the moment. But I think it needs to be rolled out right across the country if they're going to have any chance at all to make any difference at all. But I'm not a political numbers man. They might know exactly how it's going to be run. However, there was something that was held last weekend, I think it was, from memory. I didn't hear about it until post-event, so to speak. But there was a Freedom Summit held, and I believe it had a lot to do with political parties, which probably is part of the reason why I didn't hear much about it. But I thought, when I saw this today, and it runs about, nearly 6 minutes, but I think it's important that this program gives you an idea of all sides of what's going on. I may tell you my perspective on it, but that's not me telling you what to do. I may tell you my opinion or what I would do in that position, but that's just my thoughts. It's up to you to make up your own mind. This Freedom Summit brought together the Libertarians, the iHeart Party, and the People First Party. Every party was invited, as far as I know, and quite a few smaller parties were invited to attend. Some did, some didn't, but apologies were sent, which I suppose is a good thing. Rather than me trying to go through and wrap up what was decided at that event, I think I should let them do that. And they've produced quite a nice little video with one of the Libertarians out of Victoria that will explain exactly what the Freedom Summit achieved when it was held recently.
Freedom voters of Australia. When I last spoke with you here sitting at this desk, we were uncertain how many parties would answer the call to attend the Freedom Summit we held on Sunday, and whether or not anything would emerge from the summit as agreed. I'm excited to announce that there were several important agreements made between the parties who participated, which is People First, Libertarians, and the Heart Party. Family First had initially indicated they would attend, but cancelled at fairly short notice and sort of said they were still interested in cooperation, but maybe it was a bit too close to the election for them. As you'll see when I announce some of these things, the door is still very much open for Family First and any other party on the Freedom Party side that wants to participate. So without further ado, firstly, we have a 2-for-2 preference swap between Gerard Rennick's People First Party and the Libertarians in Queensland and Victoria. While this falls short of the formal coalition unity ticket many of you were hoping to see, this reflects that in Queensland and Victoria, there were established campaigns and candidates on the ground that it would be too disruptive to remove, and that the movement actually benefits from the fruits of both of those campaigns. So we're making it so that whichever of our parties gets the higher first preference vote, the other parties' preferences will flow in behind them. So we're supporting both parties and making it more likely that whichever of the two parties gets the higher vote will have the best result. In New South Wales, however, where there were less established candidates on the ground and more scope for creative collaboration, I'm excited to announce that there will be a formal Senate coalition ticket. This means that, like with the Liberals and Nationals in the Senate, where both party names are part of the above-the-line coalition name, and each candidate appears below the line with their own party next to their name, we will have a coalition between the Libertarian Party at number 1 on the Senate ticket in New South Wales. We will have the Heart Party at number 2, and we will have People's First at number 3 in that joint coalition ticket in New South Wales. So this is a really, really exciting development. As far as I'm aware, it's the first time outside of the Liberal National Coalition we have ever had a true Senate coalition in the Senate before, and it's certainly the first time that minor freedom parties have collaborated to this extent. So this is a real pilot program and test of the kind of collaboration and unity we'd like to see and would have liked to see around the country had we had more time to prepare. And it's a model of what may work ahead of 2028. So this is incredibly exciting. It means that in New South Wales, supporters of this alliance will have one ticket to vote for and will have one box to check or one box to number above the line in the Senate. So extremely exciting news. The third announcement, and I know there's quite a bit in here, but I know you guys have all been waiting excitedly, so I want to make sure this video is worth it. The third announcement is that the constituent parties have announced the creation of a vehicle for cooperation and voter education called the Australia First Alliance. This alliance will have its own X account, which this video is being posted from, and will signal boost constituent parties on areas of shared policy interest, including free speech and civil liberties, lower taxes, and also, importantly, COVID justice. Finally, we have another exciting announcement to make, which is that all of the constituent parties, no matter which parties have attended the summit or not, pledge to put Australian freedom parties first in the Senate before the majors. This means that Gerard Rennick's People First, the Libertarian Party and Heart Party all commit to ensuring that freedom-friendly minor parties appear ahead of the major parties on the Senate ballot. This should be a pledge that should be uncontroversial and that any party claiming the mantle of Freedom Party or disruptor to the Uni-Party machine should gladly make. And I warmly invite all freedom parties on the centre and right of Australian politics to sign up to this pledge. We welcome and encourage any parties, whether they're at the summit or not, to do so, and we call on supporters of those parties and people who would like to vote for those parties to urge them to sign on. So the ball is in your court. You, the people, have the ability to have your desired elected representatives and the parties you support commit in writing to the Australian people that they will not preference Liberal, Labor or the Greens before other freedom minor parties. And finally, the parties in attendance at the summit agreed to a second summit date on the 1st of June in 2025, 2 weeks after the last date the election could be held, to discuss the results of the election and, just as importantly, to talk about more formal collaboration steps and planning for the 2028 federal election. In other words, what should have happened immediately after the election in 2022. I was proud to be involved and to be a part of this summit. You'll hear shortly from other attendees about the pledges they've made and their support for the Australia First Alliance. And this is only the beginning. The door is very much open, both with respect to joining the Australia First Alliance and with respect to signing up to the Freedom Party's first pledge. The door is wide open for other parties to show that they care about Australia and to show that they care about the future of the freedom movement in our country.
Not a bad sort of a outline of what happened at the Freedom Summit, I think, last Sunday. You can obviously see how a lot of you feel about that, and it is a mixed bag. There are some people who will vote. There are some who will go in and donkey vote. There are some who just won't pay the fine, and there are some who won't and will pay the fine. And I did see one of the chats said that Ricardo is obviously suggesting you don't vote and you do pay the fine. Why is he saying don't vote but do pay the fine? Well, he's saying that because it keeps you poorer, but it keeps you out of their system. If you don't pay the fine, it will just continue to add up and add up and add up and add up. And I can tell you from experience that they will try and take your license off you and anything else to make you comply into giving them money. So unless you really want to fight them on that, and there are plenty of ways and means that we do that, then the easiest way to do it is to pay the fine. And I don't know what it is these days, $100 or $120 maybe. We need to fix that system completely. So how do we do that? Well, these guys are trying with their alliance, the Australia First Alliance. And I particularly like the pledge that the Libertarians have put together that they want all these parties to sign. It's a pledge to make sure that they put all the major parties last, and that if you are going to run, you're going to make decisions for all Australians, not to benefit your own pocket. I quite like that platform, and if it needs to be promoted, I would be happy to talk more about it. However, will I follow through and go on with all of that? I don't know. I have other plans. There are people that I'm talking with that have other plans for other things. I find those plans quite exciting. When we're ready to share them, or they're ready to share them, I'm sure we will. But at the moment, it's pay your money, take your chances, or don't pay your money and take your chances. That's really how it works. A lot of chat suggesting the freedom movement should come together. God, we're trying. However, you see that these party-type organisations are trying to lead the movement now. And I guess they have to, because none of us have stood up to do it, except Ricardo, and, well, we'll see where that went. This is why I was talking about being involved in the grand jury indictment process. The more people that we have involved with that, the more intent there is shown to the world that we want it changed. And the more people that sign up to this, the more people we can demonstrate are awake to what is going on in this country. And we demand that it gets fixed. Only you can figure out how you can help do that. Maybe there are some tools we can help you with through the show. Maybe there are some other tools through FBN we can help you with, and maybe in the near future there might be a few ideas that we can help you run with. But ultimately, it's up to you. It's not up to me. I'm one person. It's not up to the 25, the 50, the 150, or the 1,000 others that are working on plans at the moment. It doesn't matter if there's 100,000 others working on plans at the moment. If those plans don't include dragging at least 5 million Australians to our side of the argument, then they're not really helping. I see, usually in politics, groups like this Australia First Alliance just as a smokescreen. There is no different. And the fact that Craig Kelly's smiling all over it indicates to me that there could well be some Masonic money floating around in the background. Do we think that could be possible? So, look, what do we do? I just scared the crap out of Rick. Sorry, Sunflower. Sorry, Rick. God, and scaring the crap out of Rick could be a very nasty surprise. Sorry, Sunflower. only you can bring more Australians to our side of the argument. And we're not talking about arguments. It's a bad word to use. We are trying to get more critical thinkers into the movement. We're all a pretty disparate mob. We're spread out all over the place, and they have made it difficult for us to talk in public, although these days it's much easier to identify. And when you do identify as someone who is awake, you quite often find a lot of awake people will step up and have a conversation with you, which is great. What we need is more of those people on your streets doing that on a daily basis, talking to friends, family, and complete bloody strangers, and trying to give them some of those logic locks that I hand out here occasionally, or you can find anywhere on the internet. Some of those things that really make you go, is Australia really buying more Russian oil-produced products than anybody else in the world? And doesn't that mean that we are funding Russia, and we are also sending what currently I think amounts to over $300 billion worth of aid? I think we've got a new word for that. Fraud, but aid to Ukraine. I mean, we're really doing quite well, hey? Well, I'm sure the politicians who did the deals are doing quite well. Sorry, Rachel, I'm just reading your comment. Let me bring it up so everybody else can. Bosie was against not voting. Yeah, he was. He was very much against the whole not voting thing. He wanted your vote. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Look, I'll be honest. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I'm trying to figure out if I should say this. I think Ricardo Bosi cannot be the leader of this country. I'm sorry, that was very dramatic for a really piss poor sentence. I cannot see him as a leader of the country. However, an interim person between the filth that we throw out and hopefully the new people, the new blood, the new life of this nation that we put into that position to represent us in that place. And it won't be the place that they built for themselves, that bloody mausoleum on the hill in Canberra. Then, yes, I think he has the ability to be the strong person this country requires in that interim period. I think he has the organizational skills and abilities to coordinate that effort, given that he will have a lot of support around him. I temper everything I've just said with the fact that this would be assumed he would be appointed by the Trump administration and would be acting more like a governor under advisement from the Trump administration while putting in place our new electoral system and maybe dealing with the QFS and the financial reset. I think he would be good in a short-term role. Ricardo, like any military person who has spent decades in the military has learned very well. People in the military follow orders. They don't say no when a senior person to them tells them to do something. Now, Ricardo has been up through the ranks and has obviously said yes a great deal of times, even when there was things he may not have agreed with. But only fight the wars you can win, I guess. And he won all his wars and eventually got to the peak of the tree as a lieutenant colonel. And therefore, he was the one who no longer had to say yes. He just had to hear it. Do this, do that, do the other. Yes, sir. Now, when Ricardo began the party and it started to show signs of stress, those stress signs were through lack of communication for the most part. Lack of understanding that the people he had attracted to him wanted and needed, in certain circumstances, to be able to make contact with him. And I'm not saying that he should have handed out his personal phone number or his personal email address so everybody could annoy the crap out of him whenever they liked. I'm not suggesting that for a second. What they needed to have was a strategy to manage that, and they had none. And it blew up in their faces very, very badly. They refused all help, I'll tell you, in the months leading up to all of this. They refused all help from people who could help significantly. Now, whether they did that because they were afraid of being infiltrated or they didn't trust the people doing the offering, and that I put my hand up for that. I was offering. Maybe they didn't trust me. Clearly, they don't anymore. Oh, shit, the wind's just blown up. I might have to close down a window. But I do think that Ricardo could be a leader for an interim period to set up new elections. I think, not sure there'd be anybody else. Could we use him as the Doge special envoy? Is that what they call it? A special envoy? Could you have him looking into the books? I don't know, to be honest, for a variety of reasons. None of them too nefarious. But could you have him oversee that? Yes, I think you could. I think if you saw Ricardo Bozzi walking into your bureaucrat office and your shiny bum chairs all sitting there smiling and smug, I think one look, withering look from Ricardo Bozzi would take that smug smile right off your face. So yes, I think he could have a very good effect there. But as you guys are pointing out, could he be trusted? Well, that's a decision only you can make. We've all had some taste. It's only a decision you could make. I like your suggestion. Mel Gibson. Yes, that could be interesting. I wouldn't mind getting, where is that? Sunflower, 100%. Madison King. Now, there is an independent woman I would trust. And I've never met her or spoken to her, but God, I love how she speaks. There is a woman I would trust to go looking through the books and telling the truth and finding the waste and pointing it out. She doesn't care black, white, or brindle. She just cares that we're all being screwed and not being paid for it. That's probably a bad analogy. I apologize. But, yeah, Madison King, bloody good suggestion. What about aggro, says Sandy Kay? Well, I can have a talk to his good friend Jamie Dunn and see whether or not we can get something there. But I think if it came to counting, Jamie would be only interested in counting his own bank account and see what happens from there. Rod Cullerton is another suggestion that's popped up. Yeah, quite possibly Rod could be quite good. I would even go so far as to put forward Len, my friend Leonard, who has written a book, which I can't reach and show you at the moment, but I will actually. I've only just finished reading it. He's a self-published author. He's written 4 books, Len, and he was going to Antarctica to see whether or not the Earth is flat or round, and he would have won the bet, as it turned out. But unfortunately wasn't able to make the trip. But Len, a very learned man and a very fair man. He'd be the kind of bloke you'd put in charge too. So, yeah, there is plenty of them around. All right, folks, the wind has definitely picked up out here. I've got a blackout curtain that is trying to alleviate itself from its position at the moment. The only reason it's staying there is because I've got a seat in the way. So I better go out and have to close down a little bit. The wind is on the way, the weather is on the way, and all we're doing is waiting. If you are along the coast, though, you won't be waiting. The waves will be pounding the living crap out of the coastline from Coffs Harbour north to the Sunshine Coast. And there is huge amounts of sand that's going to be scarped out off the land and dragged out to sea, anywhere between 600 metres and a couple of kilometres. And it'll take a long while for a lot of that coastline to return. There is significant concern for some central business district areas in the Gold Coast, and some concern for canal properties. Think there is, I don't know if it's a king tide, but there's certainly going to be a big tide. But one of the major issues is the size of the waves. There was a 7-metre wave today off Main Beach in Surfers Paradise. There are 13-metre waves off North Stradbroke Island and off Bribie, and 9-metre waves in between the two. So some of those 7-metre waves are going to be pounding the entire Surfers Paradise or Gold Coast beach area. And there are some concerns that council infrastructure, parkland, paths, and potentially roads may be made unsafe. So there is a huge amount of power in the water that's coming, and it's not just the rain that's the problem. It is the sea. So what happens at the moment, or what seems to be happening at the moment, is that the system has been slowed. And I say the system has been slowed because we do believe that there is every opportunity that there is some involvement here from the weather manipulators. And if you watched last night's show, you would have heard me mention and show you this image, which I think I've still got in here somewhere to show you. This one. So this was a bit of a hand-drawn mud map, if you like, of where those weird beams that we see emanating from time to time, really weird beams, were coming from. Today, I received the actual screenshot. That's what was coming out of Norfolk Island for the last couple of days. And we know that that is a very powerful beam capable of pushing that system north again. And bugger me, what did it do? The system came down the coast and did a U-turn, and now is back up again, somewhere now predicted to hit somewhere between Brisbane and the Gold Coast on Saturday. Yep, it's slowed down that much. We do have a bit of wind. We are expecting a little bit of rain. I did hear Mick gave me a call earlier just to say that I think we're now expecting something a bit more like 60 mils of rain on Saturday. So that's still not a large amount of rain, and we're going to get drizzle and whatnot for the next few days. So we should be okay, fingers crossed. We are very, very well prepared. The chainsaws are ready to go in case we've got to cut our way out. I don't mean of where we live, but just off the property and then back down into town. We fully expect there'll be trees down all over the place. So we're very well prepared. In fact, today I went out and bought 60 litres of unleaded and 60 litres of diesel because if we have big trees fall over here, we're going to need the excavator and potentially the tractor and whatnot to clear paths. So our fuel reserves on the property had been cleaned out recently. So I've been off madly spending money for diesel and for unleaded, just in case we do wind up having a bit of a shutdown of systems. We won't be able to get in to get fuel. Maybe if there's damage in town or servos get caught or the roads get blocked, and that can happen our way. It's a very regular occurrence. Creeks wash bridges away in certain roads out here. So we've only got two ways of getting into town and well, really only one way of getting into Canungra and two ways, if you like, of getting to the Gold Coast, neither of which are very pleasant in the wet at this time. So anyway, we'll just roll with the punches. That's all you can do, or roll with the wind. And there is one great saving grace at this time of the year when the rain is pissing down and the wind is blowing and everything's howling. It really is only the dickheads on the road. So you stay home and watch a good show. Stay safe, folks. Talk to you tomorrow.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's rock!